Howdy, all you delicious people. I am here today to review Disney's The Mighty Ducks Game Changers, Episode 3. As I would probably still try to remind people that recently I said through the earlier episodes that really, for me, I'm probably not this show's target audience, I guess you could say. It's like, well, the show is for a family, so anybody, but yeah, but I don't think so. But with that said, though, I would say that this episode is slightly better from last week's episode. Slightly. And I mean one sneeze better than the last episode, which I kind of deemed the episode like, man, that episode was awful. That episode was horrible. That episode was whatever. Like, this episode is kind of making it one slight notch above where it was in previous episode, where it's just like a terrible episode. It's just kind of like okay, like we take an entire episode to build one character, and we also have to do a lot of like if anything, there is a good point at the tail end of this episode, but other than that, there really is just me going in and saying like, well, hey, like I loved what they did with Bombay in this episode. We actually got some real true legitimate backstory of Bombay, and so I really liked that. I liked the way that this episode kind of ended. It kind of had a feel good moment at the tail end of this episode. Uh, so we could say that. We could say that. I think the like most of this episode though, I think was something that I was severely casually watching because I was just like very uninterested. I was severely uninterested because when we have a one character built episode, I completely am just like turned off by something like that. And we have it to where we're trying to build one character to be a part of the Don't Bothers, and really that's what this episode really and truly is. And I was completely and utterly disinterested by that. It could have been anybody. It could have been anybody that could have been in the attempt of adding somebody onto this team. And immediately once I saw that, I was just like, I am just not interested at all. Because when looking at it, I'm like, well, that means that you'll limit your cast and also limit how much ice time, let's just say, is in this show, which I think literally, or there, I mean, literally, I'm using literally too much of a word here, but we have it to where there is not a hockey game seemingly at all still being played within 3 episodes. Like, it kind of feels blatantly obvious that there is just a lot of shooting around. Like, they're trying to like skirt around the hockey, and that's becoming like blatantly obvious. And I get it. Like, I get the fact that it's like, well, yeah, but it's the new normal and sports is hard to do right now and so on and so forth. But again, it's also hockey. It's also hockey. And I'm just like, you know what? It's kind of obvious that this feels like a show uh, having it like, you know how many times that I would see like within this show when they actually do hockey, it'll be like one player and an entire empty rink, and this player is going and just skating his way to go and toss in a puck. I'm like, man, like you could never see any background hockey players, or you can obviously see that this entire game feels choreographed to a Deadpool like level. Remember when, well, maybe this is a horrible example because this is a rated R movie, but we have it to where Deadpool walks into the Xavier mansion, and we end up having Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead in that Xavier mansion. And we end up having it to where Deadpool is like, why is it every single time I end up going into this building, I'm seeing just Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead and no one else? It feels like all of the X-Men are all gone, or have all gone on vacation, or had all left. You would have thought that they would have, like, they would have tried to fill this school with students and whoever and whatever. But yeah, like I kind of feel like that exact same analogy applies to this Mighty Ducks Game Changer when you look at the hockey environment. It doesn't really look like a hockey environment. It looks like, okay, hey, there's one person that has to be going into one area that is going to go up against a goalie, and that's all you see. And maybe that's how they shot a lot of this stuff in the Mighty Ducks, and I didn't realize it. But it kind of becomes much more obvious when watching the show rather than watching the movies. Like, when you watch the movies, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like there's a lot going on in the background. For this one, it's just not that way. So, anyways, yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to say about this episode. If anything, some interesting things going on with Gordon Bombay, but pretty much everything else, I could have watched the rest of this episode in all brutal honesty on mute, and I would have figured out exactly what's going on. So, because there is no dialogue needed for any of this stuff. It's just, excuse me. It was kind of like immediately once I saw exactly how this episode was to start off, I was like, dude, this is predictable. This is predictable. So, it's kind of like stretching the Mighty Ducks. If they stretched the Mighty Ducks into a show, like that's what they're doing, and they're really stretching it out. And so, yeah, and again, we're kind of, I would say that we're avoiding hockey. We're not completely and otherwise like not doing it. We're just avoiding it. We're avoiding it with 3 episodes now in the bank. So let's go into spoilers about this episode. Because, yeah, let's go into spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. So, the most vitally important parts that I think actually happened for me in this episode, because, and a lot of this stuff I'm just going to just out after that, because I could just, there's, we have it to where Sophie Hudson Baltra was added into the Don't Bother team. And that took a bulk of this episode to add this Mighty Ducks person to the Don't Bothers. And so I could not care about that. It's not because of that actress. It's not because of the situation or whatever. Like, it could have been a guy, it could have been a goat, it could have been an alien that they tried to add onto this team, and I wouldn't have cared at all about who they were going to add into this episode, because I felt that this was gonna just be disinteresting. But here are the interesting slivers of parts that we got from this show. So, we have Alex who is trying to find out information about Gordon Bombay, and she's trying to Google information about him, figure out any little thing about him. And we end up having Alex asking her coworker, "Hey, do you know anything about Gordon Bombay?" And this coworker is like, "Well, no, hey, no, like, Gordon Bombay was like a million years ago. Like, I don't know anything about Gordon Bombay, even though he has multiple movies and a franchise of sorts of the Mighty Ducks. Oh, I don't know anything about that guy. That was a bajillion, billion, trillion years ago, because Emilio Estevez is an immortal, and evidently. So, Emilio Estevez is a vampire. Why do you think that he's consistently in the Ice Palace? He's either a zombie or he's a vampire, and he needs the cooling sensation of the ice rink to live forever. We figured it out. That's the backstory that happens into this episode of Bombay's character. We find out he's Dracula or something along those lines. Why do you think that Bombay was so stringent about having his vendor girl do her job and make sure she gives cocoa to people? Because we didn't want Bombay to be working in the vending machine counter thing during the day, because he could dust, he could burn up. Like, we had a whole side story about Gordon Bombay's gift shop, whatever worker. We had a whole story about this girl who had a relationship with some vendor, and then the vendor ended up breaking up with her, and so now we have it to where this girl just became a very lazy worker, and so Bombay had to actually go and do an actual job besides just sleeping and or being angry. And so we end up having it to where Bombay is all mad because he actually has to do work in this place that he just was, I guess, just supposed to just throw money into, I guess. So here's the thing, though. So we have it to where Nick ends up getting attracted to this gift shop, whatever, vending machine girl worker thing. And so, of course, she's way older than he is, and bizarrely, he's, like, after her. And so when the vending machine guy comes back to give Nick flowers, because this part is so important into this episode, Nick throws the flowers away. Bombay tells Nick to dive back into that dumpster, really dive in there, really get your hands dirty, and get those flowers out of that dumpster to give to the Coco girl. I don't know what her name is because I don't really care, because it's not important at all. But this story is, really it is. And so Nick does that, and eventually the Coco girl realizes that she needs to go and find the right man, and she does that at the tail end of this episode. Wow, was that story just so important. So now to the actual important things. So, like I said before, Alex was researching Bombay, and so eventually Alex ends up confronting Bombay, and she's like, you know what? I've Googled you. I've Wikipedia'd you. I did all of these things instead of coming right to you and said, "Hey, Bombay, Mighty Ducks, history, let me know." And then Bombay would have said, "Well, here's the entire movie franchise. There you go." And Alex would have been like, "Oh, great, thanks. I'll go and watch these, and then I'll come back. But I also have Disney Plus." It's like, well, wait a minute, Alex. If you have Disney Plus, why didn't you just watch all these before I gave you all the DVD set? It's like, well, I just wanted to know. Yeah, no. So Alex goes and questions Bombay about being uh being a former coach, uh hockey guy, whatever. And so we have finally Bombay caving in and saying, you know what? You're right. I used to do the hockey. And so we have Bombay who goes into this backstory about mentioning that he uh, consistently started to work with Mighty Ducks, and all that they cared about for certain teams was winning. And Bombay was like, yeah, but that's fun though. And the Mighty Ducks was like, nah, but we want to win. And so that's when eventually Bombay switched to teaching college hockey. And here's the thing that I don't understand. I'm like, this never came up during any of the Mighty Duck movies, but I guess there's some hidden whatever thing that maybe you can kind of really understand what happened with the last Mighty Ducks movie, how actually Bombay didn't actually coach uh, the last team. It ended up being someone else. So we end up having it to where the backstory of it is that Bombay ended up giving money away to some kid that desperately needed it, and to be able to afford to put tape on his hockey stick. And we end up having it to where the college community end up saying, "Hey, well, that's wrong. Like, you gave money away to one of your students, and that's wrong. So we're gonna tell you that you're gonna have to just quietly retire." And so he did. And so we end up having it to where Bombay, I guess, did not retire to the Han Sports thing. He didn't retire to that. He was like, no, like, I'm not going to retire to a hockey thing. No, I'm just going to burn that store down to the ground. And then I just am going to meet a friend that is just going to give me over this ice rink, and I am just going to be thumbs up, because that's basically what happens. That Bombay ends up bumping into one of his old friends, and his friend ends up giving him this hockey rink for him to have. And so we have Bombay, who's just been skating away his worries and his troubles. So, all right, let's get into this Sophie thing. So we have Sophie, who is like slowly but surely kind of having to like be talked into the whole don't bother thing. We end up having it to where Evan is trying to like sales pitch this girl into this team, basically saying, "Hey, you know what? You know what, Sophie? You know what? The Mighty Ducks, like, everybody is great on that team. Sophie, if you actually went into the Don't Bothers team, you would get a lot more skating time, and you would be the star of this team. Everybody would be looking for you and just like, oh, wow, she's the star of this team." And so Sophie's like, I'll be a star? And so we have it to where Sophie's like, you know what, that sounds really, really great to be a star. And so, and plus, like, the Mighty Ducks aren't on the screen, so I need to be on the screen more. I need to be on the TV more. I need to be on this streaming thing more. And so we end up having Sophie going and getting a jersey of the Don't Bothers. And so Sophie's mother comes into her room, and she's like, "Well, hey, what are you doing there, girly?" And so we have it to where Sophie's mother notices the Don't Bother jersey, and she's like, "Well, what the heck? What are you doing with the Don't Bother jersey? Were you with Evan? Was he just throwing his jersey at you to so that way he can wear it? Because boyfriend, girlfriend, you know what I mean?" And Sophie's like, "No, no, 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 that's not it at all." Uh, Sophie mentions that Evan gave her the Don't Bother jersey as a joke. And Sophie's mom is like, yeah, that's really funny. That is so hilarious. Oh my god, totes my goats. And so Sophie's mother goes off, and so Sophie still has to be sold on the whole don't bother thing, and eventually we have it to where Sophie is being buttered up by the entire team. When she goes to school, everybody of the Don't Bother team are being severely nice to her and giving her tips and tricks to just have a better day. And so we have to where Sophie is won over by that. But she's also thinking, I'm like, you're still sales pitching the F out of me. What kind of garbage is this? And so we end up having it to where Sophie goes on and is to eventually start to realize that the Mighty Ducks are getting a little bit of irritated with seeing Sophie consistently with Evan or any of the Don't Bothers. And so we end up having it to where the Mighty Ducks are just kind of like, well, dude, if you're spending so much time with those people, like, we don't like you. Like, go away. Like, I am getting really irritated with you just, like, bumping shoulders with those guys. Come on. So we have it to where Evan is trying as much as humanly possible to be with Sophie, to the point of he just saying, like, hey, how about we just go out? How about we just hang out? How about we just go for a study? And you can help me with my math because I'm struggling. And I'm just like, well, is this a date or is this I just really want you on my team? Is it both? It should have honestly been both, but it's not. So, a lot of love connection going on in this episode. I don't know why, but anyways. So, we have it to where eventually Evan and the Don't Bothers are to go up against the Mighty Ducks. Oh no. And so we end up having it to where we are to showcase that now all of a sudden, absurdly, Sophie has way more camera time on the Mighty Ducks than she has in the last 2 episodes. Because, good God, she is, like, scoring every single goal. She is, like, on camera more than any of the other Mighty Ducks. I wonder why. And we have it to where, like, Sophie is scoring every single goal. She's slapshotting her way through these goals. And it's, like, 17-1. Or it's 17 goals to nothing. And so we end up having it to where, like, Sophie's like, yeah, I guess we're just beating them. I'm sorry. And so we end up having it to where Alex is just like, well, yeah, this sucks. Like, man, I wish there was somebody that could write in my notebook to tell me one play that could just get one goal on the board. I hope that could happen. And so we have it to where Alex is not looking at her notebook, and Bombay, like a clever man, ends up kind of squeaking and sneaking his way to write into Alex's notebook to give her a play that ends up giving the Don't Bothers a goal. And we have it to where it plays to kind of everyone's strengths, and it ends up kind of like, we have it to where some people are kind of like the Fall Guys, where we end up having it to where reasonably, like, some of the kids are just kind of like dropping their bodies in front of some of the other skaters, and then they're like stalling them, and we have it to where a goal had been made that day. But yeah, so we have it to where they end up scoring 1 goal, and let's go back a little bit. So, speaking of Bombay being, we end up having it to where they actually do hockey practice, which is the most hilarious thing, because they end up having hockey practice, but you can't see one iota of one thing that they actually do in this hockey practice. You can't actually tell what they're doing because immediately the entire scene is soaked up by Alex and Bombay. Having Bombay bringing in the Zamboni and trying to do stuff for the ice, because we end up having it to where Bombay is still complaining about the vending machine girl, or the vending store girl, who is doing a poor job. Why didn't he just fire her then? Because he's too nice? He could have just fired her. He could have got some. He could have hired Alex, but like, hey, Alex, how about you just go and handle the candy while I coach these people? We could have had Nick do it. It seems like Nick was doing a really good job, better than she was, the original girl. So I guess we could call it the snack store, whatever snack store part of the what I could care less. But we end up having this dialogue between Bombay and Alex, and we have it to where I think Bombay, like, we have it to where he just brings in the Zamboni in for the practice, because reasonably it's like Bombay is really and truly saying right here that it's like, dude, you are not teaching these kids. Like, you just Googled how to teach these kids. Like, you're not really, like, you don't really have full range knowledge of helping them or whatever, being a better coach. And I think that's what the Zamboni really symbolizes in that moment. Is just like, dude, like, get off the ice, like, you're not doing a good enough job. And so eventually, when Bombay sneaks in to give Alex a move, we eventually have it to where Alex just says, like, hey, you know what? I saw what you did with my notebook. I saw what you did. Like, don't fiddle around like you didn't do anything. And so Alex is giving a what for to Bombay, saying, like, you know what? You should go back and be involved in hockey somehow, because you are so, like, your head is still in it, and you're a person that has a sign that says no hockey, but you have hockey in your rink. You need to either be full on in or out. And if you want to be in, you can be in with me and the rest of the Don't Bothers, if that's what you want. Bombay, if that's what you want, then we're all here. And I'm like, what do you mean by that, Alex? Or like, are you hitting on Bombay? Like, are you going and saying like, hey, Bombay, if you if you want to be a piece of this team, we're gonna get a little piece. If you know what I mean? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what's going on with this show. Because eventually it seems that Bombay eventually falls for somebody. And it seems that we're trying not to say whether or not that Bombay is with somebody or not. Um, because I don't know. Bombay could have like a thing in Minnesota or something. He could have had a woman. And we're not confirming that yet, whether it's Joshua Jackson's mom or whatever or whoever. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.